Every age in human history has developed the ways by which we wage war upon each other. Military vehicles in particular have evolved in strange and interesting ways through the course of history. From battle cattle, yes, that's right, to flying tanks and the most armored pedal-powered bike to ever exist. We have found information on 10 of the weirdest and most amazing military vehicles in history. We can promise you that you won't believe some of what we're about to tell you. Wow. Number 1. Vespa 150 TAP. You might not think of Vespas as weapons of war, but the Italian army saw the potential in arming this iconic moped less than a decade after its birth. They commissioned a moped which was lighter, more maneuverable, and more lethal than the motorbikes their army already used. For a start, they came with an integrated machine gun. This model, however, couldn't compare to the TAP 150. The TAP model came later. It was commissioned by the French when they sought an upgrade for the American-made Cushman scooters. Vespa won the contract to produce this upgrade, and boy did they deliver. With a top speed of 40 miles per hour, unprecedented maneuverability, and an integrated M20 recoilless rifle, light anti-armor cannon, now that's serious firepower. The Vespa 150 TAP was designed to be delivered by parachute, fully assembled and almost immediately ready for action, which made it formidable. The very fact that it had an integrated weapon, however, made it unusual. The TAP saw heavy use during the war and definitely brought pride to the Vespa brand. 2. Antonov A40 Krylia Tanka. The Antonov A40 Krylia Tanka was, in essence, a tank with wings. Just let that one settle in. Yes, you heard that right, a tank with wings. In fact, the English translation literally means tank wings. These tanks were designed to be towed aloft by an airplane before gliding onto a battlefield to provide support. As cool as this sounds, however, the A40 was found to be unworkable in its prototype stage, and so never saw a battlefield. However, if there's one entry on this list that deserves a medal for sheer ambition, it is the Antonov A40. Number 3. Weaponized bulls. While you might balk at the idea of dubbing an animal a military vehicle, the term is not so far from the truth here. In ancient China and Vietnam, long before the advent of cars, motorbikes, and gliding tanks, cattle were as much as means of transport as they were a source of food. And in the face of war, they could be proto-tanks. These bulls would be pointed at the enemy, strapped with spears, laden with gunpowder, and, well, you know what comes next, right? Oh yes, the fuse was lit, along with the bull's tail, and the panicking animals were sent right into the arms of the enemy with spectacular results. If that isn't one of the weirdest military vehicles you have ever heard of, we're not sure what will be.
Whoa! Damn!
Number 4. Hot air balloons. These days, a hot air balloon is a way to enjoy the scenery. They take tourists and locals over vineyards and stunning hill ranges, but they certainly don't get involved in conflicts. During World War I, however, the American Army had a little-known but very active corps, which relied entirely on hot air balloons. The 2nd Balloon Corps was the first U.S. Air Service to reach the front lines and stayed there without relief longer than any other company. Though this may seem like an inefficient and indeed dangerous way to transport troops during times of war, the balloon companies of World War I were well respected and saw much action. Number 5. SAR tank. Of all the tanks that have been brought to bear in times of war, the SAR tank is without a doubt one of the strangest. As far as armored vehicles go, the SAR tank, or Netapir, seems like it belongs to the realm of steampunk fantasy rather than reality. The huge front wheels were designed to combat rough terrain in the same way that the tracks of modern tanks do. Each of the 9-meter wheels was powered by a 250 horsepower engine, and in the center of the tank there was a large structure which contained a top turret. This was to hold the tank's crew, of course. Only one prototype of the SAR tank was made. It was tested 60 kilometers outside of Moscow and became bogged down. Sadly, it was never retrieved, and so remains a fanciful part of military history. Number 6. Ekranoplane. The Soviet Ekranoplane is part of a family of vehicles known as GEV, or ground effect vehicles. Think of the Ekranoplane as a lethal hoverboard and you'd be on the right track. A GEV makes use of the aerodynamic interaction between the wings and the surface of the earth or water. The USSR produced the most successful ekranoplane of its day, the A-90 Orleanok, which were developed as high-speed military transports, usually based on the shores of the Caspian or Black Seas. The low longitudinal stability of these weird but wonderful vehicles has made them somewhat uncommon, however. Number 7. Churchill Crocodile. If you ask a group of school-aged boys to design a tank, you'd probably find that they'd come up with something similar to the Churchill infantry tank, also called the Crocodile tank. The Crocodile tank was not so weird in looks, but it stands out in the history of warfare as being one of the more functional tanks to be deployed during the First World War. What made them unique? They had a flamethrower. These fearsome machines were used to storm towns, alleviate stalemates, and generally strike fear into the hearts of the German forces. You heard. Imagine that bearing down on you in the battlefield. It's no wonder the Crocodile tank was the most feared of all Allied weapons during World War II. Number 8. Nuclear-proof tank, Object 279. This Soviet heavy tank, because, let's be real, all the coolest and weirdest weapons are Russian, was known as Object 279, so Bond-esque, and was designed to withstand a nuclear explosion and weighed 60 metric tons, or 132,277 pounds. Thankfully, its nuclear-proof capabilities have never been tested.
I am Groot.
No! No, that's the button that will kill everyone!
But this formidable machine could still move at 50 miles per hour and was impressively outfitted with armor-piercing weaponry. This made Object 279 incredibly impressive, but actually undermined its usefulness as well. The sheer weight of this tank meant that it quickly became bogged down in many terrains. Nonetheless, it remains the only tank thought to be capable of withstanding nuclear fallout, which kind of feels like overkill in a 60-ton moving fortress, right? Number 9. Armored Quadricycle. Designed in the late 1800s in Great Britain, the armored quadricycle definitely takes first place for strangeness in one key way: the distinct lack of protection it offered its operator. To the untrained eye, the armored quadricycle looks like two bikes tethered together by an armored plate, a gun, and a motor. And in reality, that is exactly what it was. The armored plate offered protection only to the torso and the head of the operator, and so they were vulnerable from behind, or the sides, or below the hip. But should a leg be lost, the motor would at least keep the quadricycle moving, which is something, though we're not sure that this would have comforted any sudden amputees that were failed by this localized armor plating. And number 10. Mark I tank. The British heavy tanks of World War I are certainly distinctive in looks. The rhomboidal shape they took was part of a design that made them suited to travel over difficult terrain, crush the barbed wire of no man's land, and cross the trenches that crisscross the battlefields of Europe. Unlike the modern tanks we are used to, however, the Mark I tanks were not fitted with an armored turret, as this would have made them too tall and too unstable. Instead, they had their main weapons and sponsoons at the side of the tank. These protrusions were fitted with machine guns. Perhaps not too weird, but definitely one of the legends of warfare. If you enjoy finding out about the strangest innovations in the world, be sure to hit like and subscribe.